Prior to starting my old job at McKinsey 20 years ago, I had spent several years in marketing, communications, and business writing jobs. My job at McKinsey was to help consultants improve their communications so that they could effectively convey their analyses and recommendations to their clients. As I joined the firm, I appreciated that a premier global consulting firm placed such a high emphasis on the importance of communication, and that my skills of audience mindedness, sharp editing, and message clarity would be put to use serving their clients. Then I arrived on day one of the job, and my manager walked into my office with a stack of consulting exhibit decks and plopped them onto my desk. She said, "This is how we communicate here. I thought you should get familiar so you can help the teams." I started looking through them and thought, what the heck have I gotten myself into? I thought communication meant writing, and never thought to assume that consulting, or any business analytical role for that matter, spoke a very different communication language. You've seen these kinds of pages. You've made these kinds of pages. First off, they're all turned on their side. I never heard the term vertical document until that job, as in the other kind of communications. Besides that, there was very little traditional writing. No sentences, no paragraphs, just a lot of data graphics and words and bullet points, and most of the pages didn't make any sense to me because most of them were just so bad. Consultants would come into my office with their pages and their documents, and I would get out my red pen and make edits and revisions, and they would be amazed at what seemed like magic to them because it was so contrary to what they were used to. It wasn't magic. It was just me applying the principles of communication. And I couldn't figure out why that was so difficult to understand. The issues these consultants faced had been going on for years. I found documents from my predecessors who also tried to teach the same principles, way back before the turn of the century. Years later, I found a training document from another similar consulting firm that was still dealing with the same kinds of issues. That document said excessive deck length reflects a lack of time, thought, and clarity of thinking. It used another old adage, "I'd make it shorter if I had more time." That's right, some of the brightest minds in business said they'd focus on good communication if they just weren't so darn busy. To their credit, they did advise that chart makers should avoid including slides solely to show what you analyzed. In a very dense document with all the classic bad mistakes, this best practice document suggested that slides were too dense, with too much prose, too much complexity, too much clutter, and too few illuminated insights. Somewhere around page 50, they suggested less is more. It's not magic, but time after time, year after year, it still seems really, really hard. Let's go back to the basics of Communications 101. Good communications must be audience appropriate. The right content and level of detail for the person you will be talking to, because after all of the work on those pages, you will be talking. Make sure it's clear and logical. Writing can be used to persuade through evidence and conclusions, like a math problem. A plus B equals C. Is it self-explanatory? Conversations drive the interaction, but you won't always be there. Sometimes your page might be copied and shared with a different person without you to interpret the hieroglyphics. Yes, it should be distraction-free. Less is more is good advice. Is it interesting? Does it pull the audience in with its visuals and a compelling, thought-provoking story, or raise questions to drive the thinking? Those documents I reviewed on day one of my consulting job were not interesting, and I expect you've had that problem with decks you've seen as well. Is it insightful? In the consulting world, they always talk about the so what, which makes the audience think in a new way or affirm key facts. If you've ever been in consulting or worked with others who have been there, the so what is a day one measure of whether your communication is worth reading or listening to. We're all busy. What's your point? Finally, just be brief. Say what you need to say and move on quickly. Audiences don't have time for your complex thinking. To help these communication tips sink in, take a break from me and my soapbox. It's time to do an exercise that helps you reinforce what good communications means.